Okay, so let's look at a little bit more percent problems. After today, I feel like we need a little bit more help. So let's go ahead and let's look at this. So first, we're just going to participate or look at the is over of, which is the same thing as my part over my whole is equal to percent still over 100. Okay, so this one we're just going to look at some simple problems, and then we'll take a minute to look at like 2 or 3 word problems. So let's worry about the setup first. The first thing is the setup, and then we'll look at how to solve. Remember, you can solve this in multiple ways: by looking for a relationship, by dividing to find the unit rate. You can do reduce or simplify to make your number smaller, or you could also do cross multiply and then divide. There is something that I also want to show you. Whenever you're given your part and your whole, that makes a fraction. So usually when you're given this, that means it wants it as a percent. So that means you're trying to find the percent. So in this case, I could really just take whatever my part is over my whole, top in, bottom out, because it's a fraction, turn it into a decimal, and then turn my decimal into a percent. Okay? And again, that's only when you're given your part and your whole. And we'll look at that in just a minute. Secondly, when you're given your whole and your percent, you can multiply those two to find your part. Okay? The only thing is with that, you have to make sure that you turn your percent into a decimal. Once I turn my percent into a decimal, then I can just simply multiply those two and then find out what my part is. Okay? Let's go ahead. Let's look at some examples now. Give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. Let's look at some examples now. So it says, what is 20% of 60? So anytime we're filling out a percent proportion, we already know one thing is not going to change, and that's my 100. So I'm going to put my 100 first. We know above my 100 goes my percent. Do we know my percent? Yes, 20%. And then of 60, of represents my whole number. So it would go at the bottom of my fraction. And then I'm trying to find my part. We're trying to find it what is, which is my part. So there's several different ways. So again, since we know my since we know my percent and we know my whole number, I just told you when given a whole number and your percent, we can multiply those two. But we'll do that in just a minute. Let's just solve it like we normally would first, and then we'll look at the shortcut that I showed you. So in this case, I see a relationship. So there's multiple ways that we can do this. We can reduce, we can cross multiply and divide, we can find out what my unit rate is or my scale factor. So in this case, I see a relationship. I know that 20 times 5 will give me 100. In this case, I can't multiply, but I can divide. So in this case, divided by 5, 60 divided by 5, my part would be 12. Now, let's see if we can use that same method that we were talking about earlier to get the same thing that we just got. So turn my percent into a decimal, 1, 2. So I got 0.20 or 0.2%, and then I can multiply it by my 60. So 60 times 0.2, that's 0, that's 12, and I'm going to move my decimal 1 time. So in this case, I got 12 again. Let's go ahead and let's look at number 2. 12 is 50% of what number? So in this case, the same thing. We're looking at my setup. What am I given and what am I looking for? So in this case, what never going to change? 100. That is the first thing I'm going to put. I also know my percent. My percent always goes on top of my 100. and then 12 is, so therefore I know what my 12 is, but I don't know of what number. So in this case, 12 will go at the top, and my x will go at the bottom, my variable, because that's what I'm looking for. So in this case, again, I see a relationship, or we could cross multiply and divide by 50. Let's try that way as another way, but I'm going to show you multiple ways in this case. So let's times it by 2, times it by 2, and I get 24. Okay, let's also practice our cross multiply way. So that gives me 12,000 divided by 50. I can take off a 0, take off a 0, and we're going to see how many times 5 goes into 12, which is 2 times. That's 10. That's 2. Bring down my 0. In this case, 5 goes into 20 4 times, and we still get the exact same number. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Number 3. And I'm going to just rewrite my is over of, percent over 100, which is also my part over whole, percent over 100. Okay, so now let's do the same thing that we've been doing. First thing I'm going to write is my 100, because that's never going to change. And in this case, 15 is what percent, so we know we're looking for my percent, because what percent? X, and then it says 15 over 40. Okay, now let's see how many times, or what we could do. We can reduce. We can see if it's a number that goes into both 15 and 40. We can cross multiply. We can look for the relationship. So there's several different ways that we can kind of handle this. So let's look at it. Okay, so in this case, let's just practice dividing and finding out what my unit rate is. So I know that 40, because I just went 10 or 100 divided by 40, and I get 2.5. So I know 40 times 2.5 will give me 100. Remember, whatever we do to the bottom, we also have to do to the top. So in this case, I would do the exact same thing. So I would go 15 times 2.5. That's 25. Bring up my 2. 5, 6, 7, 0, 10, 2, 3. And then I'm going to move my decimal spot 1 time. So in this case, we know my percent is 37.5%. Let's practice using our other way to solve this problem as well. So we can also cross multiply. That gives me 15,000. 40, again, cross off those zeros. I know that 15 or 4 goes into 15 3 times. That's 12. 3. That goes in there 7 times. That's 28. That's 2. Put my decimal and 0, bring that down, and that goes in there. And again, I get the same exact answer. Let's try one more really quickly. So in this case, what percent of 60 is 75? So again, we're looking for my percent. We know 60 over 75, 100x. So this is the exact problem I was talking about. So if we look right here, and also on the other one, if we look right here, this is now a fraction. So now I can just top in, bottom out this fraction to turn it into a decimal and turn it into a percent, especially when I don't see a relationship. So in this case, we can ignore this part for right now, and let's figure out what's the number that I can make this number a little bit smaller by reducing it. So I know that both numbers go into 15, and I get 15, 30, 45, 60, so 4 over 5. And in this case, I can top in, bottom out, and that gives me 8. And I'm going to just move my decimal 2 times. 1, 2. And so that gives me 80%. Let me know if you have any other questions. Try